I'm engaged. How do I get married? I'm your host, Kevin Dennis. In addition to leading the charge at Wedding IQ, I also run Fantasy Sound Event Services, a lighting and entertainment company based in Livermore, California, that I founded over 35 years ago. Each week on this podcast, we'll explore a new corner of the wedding planning so you can prepare for your I-dos without the stress. From budgeting to booking vendors to day of drama, let's talk smart wedding planning. All right. Welcome to another episode of Now That I'm Engaged, How Do I Get Married? We have the one and only Chris Thielen. So if you don't know, Chris is an amazing officiant, but Chris is also a huge baseball fan. And we were talking, obviously, we were joking that we could have a whole sports episode and bring it to the wedding folks, but we will not do that. Right, Chris? We will
spare you.
August said no.
August put her foot down and said no. But today, Chris is here talking about why a wedding officiant matters more than you think, especially since a lot of people have their friends marry them, and it usually is, for lack of a better word, a shit show. So anyway, so we have a professional here to tell us all about it. But Chris, before we do that, tell us a little bit about you and how we got Chris here today.
Yeah, well, nice to meet everybody. It's great to be here, and I'm a Bay Area guy. I grew up in Hayward and lived in Livermore for a long time, and currently live in Tracy. And I've known Kevin for years, and I've known his family for a long time, and so we've been friends. So we have been known before a wedding to chit chat about baseball as we're setting up mics and stuff. But yeah, so I've been married for 30 plus years. We have a son that's 24, and is also kind of getting into the wedding video business. He's trying. He's a film major. Graduated college with film and wants to just start shooting videos. So he's trying to get gigs and, just build a portfolio, that kind of thing. But yeah, I've been doing weddings for a long time, probably 25 years at least.
Wow.
I had done occasionally some before that for friends or whatnot. But yeah, I don't know. It kind of started at a Rios Lavelle winery up there on, Tesla, in that area. And my wife was getting her hair done, and the lady doing her hair said, "Oh, she's planning a wedding," and her official wasn't calling her back, And my wife said, "Well, my husband has done wedding before. You want to call?" And so I did it, and I was like, "Man, this is really fun," And I just it's my favorite thing to do on the weekend, and so I'd done that, and I got hooked, and just kind of living in Livermore at the time, and so I just kind of started connecting with different wineries and venues and things like that, and trying to get on their vendor lists and meeting with couples and just kind of, building it up from there. And it's a blast. I love doing it. So it's probably been about 25 years, and I usually do about 30 to 35 a year.
That's a good amount.
Yeah. So it's not too many, it's a side thing for me, and so, Fridays and Saturdays, it's the favorite thing to do, and even now you guys know, a lot more during the week, Mondays, Thursdays, things like that.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
The during the week stuff is really insane. And I think that's all a product of COVID, but it is. I joke with my friends outside of the Bay Area, because we were all Bay Area based, that we're becoming more and more like Vegas. It's like we have weddings every day of the week.
That is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Minus the Elvis costume.
Exactly.
I haven't done that yet.
I was going to just ask.
Thank you very much.
Is that like a tiered package that you have,
Right. Yes, we can work that in, maybe a la carte and something. So yeah, I love doing it. What's fun for me is that, you do kind of your other job, your regular job, and then you have something on the side. But I love to be able to work with couples, because I always say it's their best day. Your wedding is supposed to be your best day.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be able to walk people through that, and, when you have experience doing it, you can be able to walk people through, and, we've done it so many times that it's easy for us. So being able to put myself into the mind of somebody who's never done it before, or it's been years and years and years, if it's a second marriage. And they just, I always tell them, I said, there's a lot of things you don't know that you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So help us walk you through the process. It's simple, but there's a lot of little things, as you know, that can happen that you can mitigate if you kind of can see it coming, and so just being able to walk couples through that and take the stress out of it. I always make everybody pinky swear with me that they're not going to stress. So you can worry about your flowers and your food and everything else. Just pinky promise me that you won't stress the ceremony.
That's so cute. I like that.
Yeah. I like to tell them, because the typical ceremony is 20 to 25 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and I tell them, I said, you guys are up there standing, holding hands, looking at each other. You don't have anything else to do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
or to worry about,
right. Yeah. I mean, I'm there, I'm whispering instructions to them, that kind of thing. And so, I just say, just turn your brain off and just be in the moment. Because I say, I tell them, you've been up since 6 a.m. getting makeup done and getting ready and nervous and all that. And I said, that should be the most relaxed you are all day. That 15, 20 minutes that you're up there by yourselves holding hands. So I try to kind of create that atmosphere with them.
And
I
that's
love that.
And that's good because once the reception starts, they're pulled so many different directions and have to say hello and welcome to so many different family and friends. And that's amazing that you do that. So
yeah.
All right. So give us a quick rundown of what an officiant does on the day of the wedding.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Day of the wedding. Well, I usually try to make the rehearsal. So most of the time, I like to include that with me just because I want to get to know everybody and meet everybody. And
that's a fun time. Like everyone's more relaxed. Yeah.
And I will say, the times we worked together, Chris, I was always so thankful when you were at the rehearsal because you got it, man. You know what to do. So
yeah, it's simple, right? That's what we always say. It's simple, but it's some of it's muscle memory. Once we run it through a couple times, you're gonna know. And I'll joke with the couple. I'll say this is like the pre-party. Because you've got friends and family and cousins and things like that haven't come into the rehearsal if they're in the bridal party. They haven't seen each other for a long time. And so that first 10 minutes even of the rehearsal as we're kind of gathering, it's fun. It's a reunion. So it's very loose. I work with kids and stuff. And so I'm very used to, I tell them I'm very used to the chaos of it all. It doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I tell couples that, during the ceremony, if you guys, when you're there, if you want to kind of giggle and whisper the whole time, do it. If that's what helps you be in the moment. I said, you don't have to listen to anything I say, just watch the video later. But if it helps you just to be in the moment and remember everything, just do that. Just enjoy that time. And I tell them, I'll let you know when something comes up. So, but yeah, I typically, and Kevin, you've been doing it. You guys have been, August, you've been to enough of, you've seen, the guys are shucking and jiving and goofing around.
Yep.
And the girls are all attentive, and they're like, stop, guys, not gonna, but it's fun, And so that's the rehearsal is pre-party. And then, day of the wedding, I get there at least a half hour ahead and I'll, check in with you guys. You guys will get me set up with the microphones and things like that. Check in with the venue coordinator, of course. And make sure that everything is set, especially since we, most of the time the day before is a rehearsal. So the day of, I just kind of let the couple do their thing. They're getting ready. If they're having a first look, they're knocking those pictures out. And so half hour ahead, I think is about good because they've wound that down. Guests are kind of starting to arrive. And so, we'll sometimes, we might sign the license then, a little less pressure.
Yeah.
I think that's helpful. For your couples that are just kind of getting into it, they'll go through the whole license process. That's part of it. I can, when we do our meeting beforehand, I'll walk them through that process, but it's got to be just right. And so, it's a little easier, I think, to do before the ceremony. There's less pressure,
Yeah, I never thought about doing that because I always did it right after, but oh my goodness, it was always so chaotic because you're like, okay, where are the two witnesses? Like, bride and groom are off, like, downing champagne, and then there's everyone else just kind of piling into the reception space. So it's just very stressful. And then sometimes, like, the witnesses have had some drinks, and you're like, hey, so you can't scratch that out. You have to write it legibly. Like, please, this line. And then a lot of times I would write out, too, like, because I was at the venues in Pleasanton, so I would write out the word Pleasanton so that way they wouldn't spell it wrong. And sometimes they would still mess up, and I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah. It is one of those things. It has to be right just for your couples to know, it's got to be. And just so that they know, too, remember, they don't sign the license at the wedding.
Right.
So when you go to pick up your license, and it's got to be within a 90-day window before the ceremony, that's important. But when they go and pick it up, they're going to show ID and sign it at the courthouse, and the clerk will sign just to kind of verify that it's them. So they'll give you a packet. And so, the day of the wedding, really, it's just your witnesses. And then I have a part that I fill out. So one of the things with that I like to do is I offer, because, if you're going on a honeymoon right away, the last thing you want to think about is that piece of paper that's got to be in within 10 days. So
it's kind of a chore too. So
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I offer, if they want me to, and most take me up on it, just to take it with me, and I bring stamps with me, and I just drop it off at the post office on my way home.
Oh, wow.
That way it goes straight in.
Easy peasy.
Yeah. That way they can, and we take a picture. Sometimes it's good to take on a honeymoon if they've got a picture of it, good for a room upgrade or a bottle of champagne or something, but I'll mail it in for them, and that way they know it's in. So anyway, that's the license stuff. But day of the wedding, we'll talk a little bit beforehand. I like to go over with the father of the bride. Usually, if it's the father of the bride that's walking her up, you guys have seen it. I know we have a joke, that if anything goes sideways, it's the father of the bride.
It usually is. Yeah.
And I think
or if there's pets can make
true
it
that.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, don't step on her dress. Wait for her to walk up. That was always a big one too.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And I think what happens is the dads, and it's really cute, they may be a tough guy, but they get sentimental at the wedding.
Oh, big time.
Treat their daughter like their little girl, and everybody's watching. It's super emotional. And so we just walk that through, because you're right. They might inadvertently be stepping on the dress, or they have, I'll say, who gives this woman to be married on this day? And they say her mother and I or something, and they can't get that out.
Yeah.
So, it's cute. But so I'll try to check in with dad and just walk him through it one more time. And then, check in with bride and groom, make sure they're good. And then a lot of times at that point, the venue staff takes over, and, they'll kind of get everybody lined up. And when we're ready, I typically go in first, and I like to tell everybody, please silence your phones. Don't hold your phone out in the aisle trying to get a video and block the photographer,
Like everyone still does anyway after you
I know,
make that announcement.
It doesn't matter how many times you tell them. But, sometimes, and that's important too. I think we need to get instructions from the couple what they want. Some want a totally unplugged service, no phones. They want everybody just to be there in the moment. Others don't mind, and so we just kind of let it go that way. And then, and then they all walk up, and I don't know, you guys, like Kev, when you're doing the music and you're on the back or the side or something, it's not always, you can't see it all the time. But
I can't see the view. Yeah.
I love it.
You got the best view in the house, man.
I do. And I tell you, hundreds of times, and you just see, especially at some of the venues where the big doors will open, and it's bride and dad. And I'll ask everybody to stand, would you please stand for the bride, and everything. That's dramatic in itself, and just the couple of dad and bride coming forward, and boy, it hits you every time, because it's something.
You think it wouldn't after so many times. And the first dance or the parent dances always get to me too later in the evening, and don't know why, they just always do.
Right. I did one last summer for some friends. And I've known the bride since she was little, and little Allie, and she's walking up, and I almost lost it. I was like, oh, I got to get myself together.
Keep your composure.
I know. And I was like, I can't lose it here, but it was sweet,
Yeah.
Awesome. And then when, as far as the rest of it, they come forward, the giving of the bride part, and then the groom steps forward. We, hugs and kisses around. We get everybody seated, and then the couple's just up there. And then I tell them now it's cruise control, because then it can, like I said, they can just kind of relax. They can just take a deep breath. And, one of my things, and I, my site is personalwedding.net. And the reason I call it that is just, I love to do ceremonies that are really personal to the couple. So that's a big, big thing for me. Nobody's there to hear me talk. They don't know me, You guys have been to plenty of weddings, where it's just kind of blah, blah, blah. It's just, and I've been to a lot of weddings that way, where it's just like they don't know each other. The guy just got his script, and he's going to press play, and it's the same as it's ever been. And so I love to incorporate as much about the couple as we can. So I typically have some questions that I prompt couples to write out for me. How did you meet? How'd you fall in love? What do you love about each other? What character qualities do you love? What's your favorite places to go? Trips that you've taken? How was the proposal? Those kinds of things. In fact, one of the things I love to do is, just share a fun story that just kind of epitomizes who they are. If they went on a trip, and then you want everybody saying, oh yeah, that's them. That's what we love about them. And in my mind, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, and you're the best at it of everyone we work with. You really do take that moment at the very beginning, and it kind of, I feel like it gets all the audience engaged. All the guests get really engaged into the ceremony. So you do kill it on that. Good job, Chris.
Well, and that's because it's a big part of my pre-wedding thing.
Yeah.
I as we meet, usually I'll meet with couples once or twice, typically over FaceTime or Zoom, but we take time. I want to walk them through that process, but then I really urge them to share their story. Sometimes, toward the end, if they haven't written it yet, it gets tight, because you got so many little last minute details, and it's fine. But most couples do. And I'll tell you one thing that I see too is as I'm sharing about, how they fell in love and stuff, you can almost see them kind of, because now they're engaged in their story. Yeah. And I tell them, it's like, if you're flipping through the TV sometimes and your favorite movie comes on, you've seen it 20 times, but you stop because you're like, oh, I love this part.
Yeah.
And you're going to have audience members that know the story or they've seen it, but they love it. And to me, it just draws everybody in. That's what you want. You want everybody sitting there going, oh, I love these guys. I'm so glad I came. Especially for people that have traveled out, if they've traveled a long way, you might have aunts and uncles or whatever, and they've never heard. And it's so fun to be able to share that story of how they met and fell in love and what makes them special. It gives it all the romance. You've got the romance built in. Everybody's dressed up. Everybody's, the elegant, all that elegance there. But then it also gives it kind of that natural feel too. All the relational part that makes the wedding so special. So,
but sometimes I think that's the part that gets lost is the romance of a wedding, because it gets so much
stress takes over.
the stress and the details and the minutia of all that just gets. So the romance and why we're all here,
right?
It gets lost sometimes. So it again, that's good that you do that.
Yeah, one of the taglines I have, just kind of as I'm talking to couples and just even on my side, is I tell them this is way more about your marriage than the wedding. I said this is way more about decades together than one good day, because I tell them, I said the goal is not to get married. Anybody can get married. The goal is to have the 50-year anniversary party.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that's what makes your love. I mean, nobody sits at their wedding and thinks that they're not going to make it for 50 years, but it's hard. We know marriage is tough. And so being able to build it and focus on the relationship side of it, that is the day to day, because that is really just one day in their entire story.
Yeah.
It's a big one. But to be able to frame it that way and say, this is one day in the decades that you're going to have together, I think it helps perspective too, because if a bride's feeling like a bridezilla sometimes, and there's just all the minutia and all the details and everything that collapses in on somebody when they're planning, I always remind them, I'm like, like you just said, Kev, just remember why you're doing it. You love each other. Don't get in fights about the details of the wedding, forgetting
which
happens.
Why you're it happens so much. Yeah, it really does. And the parents get, especially if, like, I just did a wedding last summer, but the parents were like freshly divorced.
Oh,
and so that, and that made it really rough. And at one point I looked at the dad, I'm like, at one point you got to suck it up, and you're here for your daughter, and you need to knock it off, because you're making this day horrible for everyone. And this is about their love, not about how much you hate your ex-wife. I was like,
I know.
You think people would just put that aside, though? You know?
Yeah, most do, and I
would say, 90% do, but it's those 10% that don't. Yeah.
We've had it where, somebody got mad at me because I didn't arrange the seating, so he had to sit next to his ex-wife. And I had another one where he had
They're like, that's not my
I know. I'm like,
problem.
I had another dad. We were at a park, and he, he was upset. He made the poor bride cry at a rehearsal because something about the mom.
No.
And, so but I tell couples, hey, if you're, because my folks were split a couple of years before I, got married, and they played nice. Most play nice together because they see the bigger picture. It's about the bride and groom, and I think that's one thing too. Is I try to tell couples that, as you're going into, planning your wedding and everything, it's your wedding. You guys get to craft it. And that's what's fun for me, is to be able to craft it together. So I'll say, hey, here's your basic template. This is what a typical ceremony looks like. But none of this is set in stone. So
No.
I always tell them, we have a ring and a vow and a kiss, and everything else is kind of negotiable,
Yeah.
Mhm.
But that way they feel, because some people are very creative with it and they want to add different things, with Pinterest and seeing all the ideas that are out there. It's great. So I help them try to think about how we can incorporate those different parts into it. And what I've seen too is, some of the nicer venues that we're at, they're so gorgeous, and you may have a grandma that's upset that the wedding isn't at the church.
Yeah.
Or, they have expectations about the wedding was going to be. And I always tell couples, it's like, don't worry about that. Almost every time that I've seen that, they'll come to these beautiful wedding venues. They'll see how happy you guys are, and then they're fine.
Yeah.
At the end, they're like, oh, that was really sweet, and so they don't really hold on to a lot of that stuff.
They can be persuaded.
Well, yeah. And I think that was more 10 years ago. Like 10 years ago.
Right.
Yeah. And now people, because they were really holding on to the traditions, grandma, you had to do it this way or whatever. And now I think parents and everyone's a little bit more open, to weddings are very non-traditional now. And, yeah.
But we can incorporate some of the tradition just at a different venue.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we end up doing. Like if we, if we've had it a lot where maybe grandma wanted it in the Catholic church, but the couple didn't want to have it there or something like that, and I said, well, let's incorporate that in. We could do a prayer. We could end it with our Father. We could do, have something that we're different things that we're doing to kind of incorporate some of those elements in, but yet keeping it at this venue. And almost every time they love it, the grandparents.
They really do. Yeah. Yeah. And again, I feel like we've come a long way in 10 years. Like, if we were having this conversation 10 years ago, it'd be, a lot more fights and a lot more,
25 years ago was even worse.
Oh, well, yeah. It was
when you first began.
Yeah, you kind of had to tread lightly on some of that stuff.
Yeah, you really did. It just, you'd have to be in it was church or nothing.
Yeah.
So,
jeez.
So it's fun. So and then after, the ceremony, you're just saying what a typical day at the ceremony looks like, at the end, everybody claps all the time, it's really fun and they walk out. In fact, that's one of my things is I love an audience that's real, honestly, a little bit rambunctious, I want an audience.
It's more fun.
Best vibes.
Yeah. Because again, I work with kids. So sometimes you'll have an audience that's just real quiet. They're just kind of solemn and stuff. And it kind of creeps me out, because I'm like, come on, everybody, this is a celebration.
And it's funny. I'm wondering, Chris, because I always had this happen with me when I was coordinating was like, you obviously meet with the couple a lot first, just the two of them. And then you get to know them a little bit and their, their vibe, like their energy, their personalities. And then you get to the wedding and sometimes it's a shock to me how the rest of the crowd is, right? Like sometimes so quiet and you're like, whoa, I would not have expected that from this couple. Or they're just like, crazy rambunctious, like you said, and you're like, wow, they're very shy. I'm just like surprised that the rest of their family has just a lot of energy. So I always thought that was funny.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm sorry, Kev.
No, I was just going to say, it's like you were saying how eerie it is. It's the same for like when we're doing like introductions or trying to get them to clap for people coming up for speeches. And I'm getting like golf claps or I'm getting like just blank stares. And it's like, it is creepy. It's not comfortable.
Yeah. Well, and I don't need the audience to make me feel comfortable.
No.
It's more like, I what it is, I tell couples, I said, you want a nice little blend of the two. Like you want the romance and the elegance that all the, the venues provide, everybody being dressed. That's kind of baked in, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of that elegance is baked in. But then you also want it to feel natural because it is just the two, it's the two of you guys. It's a love story. It's all of that. And so that's why sometimes that's why I love to share their story, but sometimes we'll even, share a little joke or something, or just something because I think it's a win if everybody at some point in the ceremony goes, "Aw," like that, because you shared something real sentimental or cute.
Yeah.
But then also laugh a little bit.
Get some laughter in there as well.
Yeah. And it just, to me, it's a win if the couple just feels like, they take a deep breath. In fact, that's what I tell them all the time. I said, when dad gives you away and you take each other's hand, you walk up to the front. I said, the first thing I want you to do is just take a deep breath, and then hold hands, look at each other, say something to each other. Cause, especially if they haven't done a first look and haven't seen each other, that's a big moment, And so for them to be able to just say hi or something, and then it just sets them on a path to really enjoy the time.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and it seems like, Chris, you put a lot of like care and effort, love, like into the preparatory part of the role that you have. And I think we kind of want to know, in the audience too, what would you say is the biggest differences between hiring a professional officiant and just asking a family or friend to do it?
sure. Yeah. I think that, well, I think that the difference is you need somebody who's used to being in front of a crowd and speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I mean, I do that for a living. And so and I've done it this thousands of times. So just people will ask, well, do you get nervous? Or right before as we're ready to walk out, are you nervous? I go, no, I don't, any more than anybody else would be nervous,
No, yeah.
filling out a form if that's what they do all day. So no, so you need somebody that's just natural that way. Also, I think what's important is you need somebody who can adjust on the fly. We've had a lot of different things, that I'm sure, Kev, in those moments when you see something happening and because you've seen it right before the ceremony when you're like, oh wait, we gotta do this. And so
the wheels start turning.
To see things ahead of time and so they don't become a thing, just little things like in the moment that we've had to adjust. With some good friends and I told them, I said, you got to have the rings in the box, 'cause I always give it to the best man. If you've got one of the little ring boxes, put both rings in the box. And that way, when he comes up, he presents and it's nice to pull. It's just a little detail. There's a certain way to hold your hands at the ring thing that makes it easy to remember because, your right's on their left. And it's just those little.
And you'll see them question themselves sometimes.
Or they get caught up in, because I would say too, like, oh, make sure you grab each other's rings, like not your own ring.
Yeah, right.
Then that would be a thing too, right? So
that's right. Yeah, or after the kiss, getting out of the way. You got to get out of the way so the photo's not of you in the back going, and that's kind of weird. And little things about spacing. Like one of the things that's big for me is I'll tell couples, I'm going to center myself on the aisle and if the arch or whatever's behind us. So when they walk up, sometimes they come and then they're off center, and then I tell them, I say, you guys got to move this way because otherwise, their pictures are not composed properly.
Mm-hmm.
We're all off to the side. The video's not. It's off, And so just being able to see those things ahead of time or if the maid of honor forgets to take her bouquet, it's like, I'm giving her a wave, come on over, or straighten the dress. And there's lots of little instructions that are important that if, you know how it is. I mean, if you've never done it, it's not their fault. They just don't know.
Yeah.
And it really is. And I think that, if one of the things I say is if nobody's going to remember your food, nobody's going to remember the flowers, nobody's going to remember these little details, but they will remember if the ceremony was just awkward.
Yep.
Yeah.
When you're like,
no, I mean,
dude,
that's true.
Cringy. Yeah. I mean, you've seen it. And I've been to a few when it's cringy. Yeah.
Or Chris, oh my gosh, so many times, like if it was a family friend, they would forget to tell people to sit down.
Yes.
And then everyone is standing during the ceremony and I'm in the back like, sit, everybody sit down. Right. It's so awkward. It just sucks.
Yeah. and so the unfortunate thing is, when those moments of awkwardness and you can't erase, I mean, it's there. And when that happens, that's what people remember. And you don't want people to remember your wedding as, oh gosh, remember when that guy did, said this or did that or didn't do that, or the ceremony was 5 minutes long. Or it was an hour and a half when it was supposed to be, so there's a lot of little, and of course, you guys know, I mean, this is true of every field, that experience matters, and so you pay for, Kev, when they hire you, they're paying for decades of knowing how to read a room, play the right songs, get your equipment just right so that it works every time. And you're paying for they're paying for the experience. They have their cousin back there with a Costco speaker and a Bluetooth playing. Yeah. Sure. But that's what they're going to remember. That's what people will remember. So that's my thing is that, I mean, everybody will remember if it's awkward. And it's kind of one of those where they if it's nice, they'll remember it. Or if everything just goes well, they won't remember any of it. And that's probably a good thing. It's to the sports analogy. It's kind of like when you watch a game and you don't notice the officials, they've done a great job.
100%.
Because it's not about the officials.
No.
It's about the players. And so I want to try to make it as much about the couple as we can. Not about me or you or the mic and, August back there trying to direct traffic coordinating and stuff. So that's the big thing. I want it to be personal and about the couple as much as possible.
Yeah. And that's a good way of doing it. I just see when they use friends, it's like gambling, or family. It really is, because it's either going to be really good or it's going to be horrible. And there's usually no in between,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right.
Yeah. No. And you can tell the people that are doing it and that are really
take it seriously.
Correct. Yeah. Because they,
right.
And I usually, they're the ones I'm reminding them, make sure you tell everyone to sit down, because that's the one thing you forgot. And they're writing it down, and they're, and sometimes you'll say that and they're like, oh yeah. And then, oh yeah, I'll remember. And they get up there and everyone's standing through the entire ceremony, and it's just, and it's just, like you said, awkward. And
in that one story I told you, I just felt especially bad because this guy, he really was taking it seriously. He was such a sweet guy, and he knew about the sitting down thing, and we talked about it, and I had mentioned it to him. He's like, don't worry, I won't forget. And then he forgot. And bro, when he came back up the aisle, he came to me and he's like, August, I forgot. I feel terrible. And the fact that he really didn't mean to, but it is just the muscle memory, right? Your experience. Like, that's just not something you're going to forget. Like, even though he went in with the best intentions, it still came out that way because it's just not, it doesn't come to him like it has with someone with 25 years of experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I can't imagine doing a ceremony where everybody's standing. It's so out of frame for me.
Yeah.
I would be like, what's wrong? No,
you'd automatically be like, sit down.
Or getting out of the way of the kiss photo, or getting the order completely botched, and out of place, or, not being centered. I mean, it's one of those that, how that goes. It goes with anybody doing anything. It's like when you do it so many times, the repetition helps. And so,
really
I look at it, it's like, a lot of the places we go, it's tens of thousands of dollars to get into these venues, and they're spending lots of money on stuff that nobody else will remember, to be honest with you, and something that they would remember is a couple $100, and then what I found also is, that uncle or friend is so nervous, like you're saying, like they want so bad for it to go well, but they're out of their league. They just don't know what to do. They've never done it. And that's okay. And so the whole night they're just nervous rather than being.
Yeah, they'll come the next day like, I didn't sleep. Or they're like, can you read the script again? I'm like, dude, you got it. Just like calm down a little bit,
Yeah.
So best intentions, but again, experience just beats it all. So
and just to be able to walk people through the process too, and because I'm we're meeting with couples 9 or 10 months in advance, and I want them to say, we meet. I always try to meet with a couple right away. So if I get an email, I'm like, hey, let's set something up next week. Let's just, because I want to get to know them. I want them to know me. I want them to see that it's a good fit, and then before they even sign the contract or whatever. So typically what I'll do is if somebody contacts me, I'll contact them as quick as I can. Sometimes it's a couple of days, but whatever, just soon. And then try to set up a meeting with them, just mostly FaceTime and Zoom. And so, and it's 45 minutes or so. It doesn't have to be too long, but what I'll do is I'll walk them through kind of the whole process, because again, if you don't know what you don't know, it could be pretty daunting. I'll explain the license and the process of getting that. We'll explain what a typical ceremony looks like. We can go through who's going to walk with who. We can walk through what I do versus what the venue coordinator does. And sometimes we'll talk about vendors, and there was somebody last week I was talking to, they hadn't gotten a DJ. I was like, you guys got to use fantasy,
Kevin.
There he is. And so, it's fun because when we show up and there's all the guys that know each other and we've worked together so much.
It's so much more comfortable.
Oh gosh.
So much
more.
My
favorite day is when it's all like people I know, preferred vendors. It just goes so smoothly.
Yeah, we're like it's our little all-star team, and but
exactly. We're back to sports again.
Yeah,
you brought it up twice now,
guys.
we do. Chris and I really do get in trouble at weddings because we're over there in the corner talking about baseball mainly because
yapping.
Yeah.
Well, and so and that initial meeting then, and so I want them to feel like they feel good about the process and stuff.
Yeah.
So I tell them what I usually do is as soon as I get the email or whatever, I'll block that date in my calendar if it's open. I'll just dump it in there as kind of a soft hold, and then I'll meet with the couple, and then they can decide if it's a good fit. And then at that point, deposit and contract, and then that just kind of solidifies it. But I always let them know it's like the first couple that ask me for a date and I put it in there, they kind of get dibs. So that's one of the things I like to do. And so that, if it's, you got 1,000 things going on, they're not always thinking contract immediately. So I just let them know it's like, I'm holding the date for you until I get somebody else, and if it's been a month or two and somebody else asks me about that date, I'll always call that first couple and say, hey, do you still want to do it? Do you still want to use me? You get dibs, that kind of thing. So
yeah. Well, that's another reason for just, booking your vendors ASAP too, securing that date.
Yeah. It's funny. I found that I'm one of the last ones usually.
I know.
Interesting.
You are. Yeah. Because sometimes I'll meet with them and I'm like, they don't have a fit. You need an officiate, and then I refer them to you, or, it's like, let's get going,
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes it's like they're a couple months out. I'm like, what are we doing?
Because the ceremony, I feel, is just the most important part, right?
It's the reason why we're there.
And and honestly, for vendors, I honestly love that you brought up earlier, like this should be the least stressful part for the couple, because it's funny because it's the most stressful part for us.
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, I think it's very, like when I was coordinating, like once the ceremony was done, I was like, okay, everything else is kind of smooth sailing now. There's so many little intricacies that go into it that, it's just, that's funny that you said that.
It's funny, as being on the DJ side, I feel the same way. It's like once I get the music done and, the microphone didn't have any interference, we got through and it's smooth. I exhale and the rest of it is just walking the park.
It just kind of does itself, at that point. So
yeah, and that's the thing. That's why having somebody that can adjust even on the fly. If something's not working. I've had it where a microphone's not working, or we've had it before where it's cutting out, or it's too windy and all that feedback's coming through. Yeah, and then I'll look at the DJ and I'll take the mic off and I can just project. I'll just project my voice out, or they'll bring me a little handheld and we go that way. I mean, so that kind of thing is to be able to do something, adjust on the fly, I think is big, and that would be something where I think that the cousin or uncle would have a really hard time because they wouldn't know, how it's supposed to go, which is, again, just a couple $100 is nothing.
It's really not. We always say that in wedding dollars, nothing.
I know. I always say wedding dollars, it's not that much money. Yeah. I say that a lot. That's one of the things I say.
Well, that's the thing. And people will spend money on weddings that they would never spend elsewhere.
No.
And that's okay.
It's so strange.
They'll get the value meal at McDonald's, but yet they'll go spend, buy filet mignon at the wedding,
And that's great, but that's a once in a lifetime thing. I tell couples that. I'm like, listen, you're doing this once, you don't want to do this
the YOLO
again.
brain comes on.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, let's make it special and let's make it something that's memorable and something that they can relax and their friends and family can, they don't have to stress about. And, it is worth it. It's a value add, I think, that way. It's just to feel like, okay, that little thing, that one part is just taken care of. I could check it off my list. And that's a big thing too. So for me, I tell couples in that initial meeting, we'll go over things, but I tell them, I'm like, hey, any amount of contact you need from me in the next 9 or 10 months, just call or text me in the middle of the day. Sometimes I'm working on something in my job and then I get a text for a wedding. I'm like, oh, wedding. We got to go to a wedding. And it's fun. It's just kind of fun for me. It's a nice break. And, but again, I love working with young couples because I've worked with teenagers and kids for 30 years. And so a lot of the how old I am. But a lot of the people getting married now, I was with their generation as kids,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm doing weddings for, they're adults now, but I knew them as kids.
Yeah, I know.
And so it's a lot of fun for me. So I feel like I kind of understand the generation. I want them to feel like they could just contact me about anything. And I'll, because I'll explain the license or something. And it's a bit of a process. And I'll just say, listen, you're going to forget everything I just said. So when it's within 90 days of the wedding and you have to go get your license, just call me again and I'll refresh you and we'll go through the process again, just so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
I really like how you connect your two passions because they kind of do go hand in hand, right? Like just working with kids and then or like a rambunctious, chaotic group and just kind of applying it to something else that you enjoy. I think that's really cool.
Well, I joke with couples. I'll say, I don't mind the chaos, like at the rehearsal and stuff like that, because I joke of like groomsmen are just fourth graders that can shave.
Yeah.
That's really the only difference.
Truest thing ever said.
you get a group of 5 or 6, 28-year-old dudes together that are buddies from childhood. Oh, you're not going to stop them from goofing around. But I'm in on it. I love it. Because then we can poke at the groom, and it's like a family reunion in a lot of ways. So it should be that way. It's fun. So
I agree. All right. As we get ready to start wrapping things up, I kind of wanted to ask you, are there any common mistakes that couples make when planning their wedding that they could avoid?
Yeah. One is waiting too long to book the officiant.
Yeah. Fair.
because
not getting what you want. Yeah.
Well, that's a bit. Even in the last couple weeks, I've had to turn down several because I'm just already booked.
Wow.
And so I typically book, I'd say 9-10 months in advance. I've got one booked for October, November. I just got one for December. I haven't really started booking for 26 yet, but I've got probably 20 at least on the board for the rest of this year, 25 probably. And then I'll get some, that are a little more last minute, which is okay. So I think, waiting too long, because it's easy to get once you get the venue and you have your date, just a quick call. Like, that's the thing. They'll think it's going to take forever. It really doesn't. Just call or text me, email, whatever. And then I'll just hold the date.
And I looked at your site, Chris. You have email and phone number right there. So it's like very easy to get a hold of you. So
I try to look every day. Sometimes, texting, I'm like everybody else. That's immediate. If you want to call me, just call me and I'll get back right away. Texting too. So, but the email there's a little bit more of a trail. That's probably better. And, but even if we don't set up our meeting for another month, at least you've gotten on my calendar. Or at least I can say, oh yeah, I'm free that day, and let me block the date for you, that kind of thing. So, I think that's a common mistake. Another one I think is majoring on the minors. Sometimes I think couples will go in and they'll think that these particular decorations or this particular little things that really are very small in the grand scheme of your wedding day. They put a lot of effort into it. And some of the bigger things they just kind of let slide. And so there are some majors, booking those vendors right away, getting the ones that you want, and are more important than the favors, or the choices of wine or
napkin fold.
What
or the color.
The color. What hats are going to be in the photo booth? stuff like that. It just doesn't. Those are just such small things that you'll wish you would have. There's the old illustration of if you got a jar and you got different size rocks, and you always put the big rocks in first, and then the small, then all the way down, and then you pour the sand, and then you put because you want to get those big rocks done first. I think that's common.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, I do too. So cool.
So but I like I said, I love it. It's so fun for me, and I'm local, and so it's easy for me. It's, a lot of the weddings that I do are in Livermore, Pleasanton area, or just but I'll travel a little bit. Sometimes if it's Napa or San Jose, I'm not able to make the rehearsal, but most of the time, most of the time the venue coordinator's running it.
I think whenever I had you were always at the rehearsal, but it was local as well too. So.
Yeah. There's times that I'll go and they're like, "Why are you here?" Because they don't expect the officiants usually to go.
Oh, Really? Interesting.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, but I like to if I can. But I that's a big thing for me is I just try to make the process simple.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. I just want to make it as stress free as possible because there's so many other things. I mean, just about everybody getting married now, they've got their careers, they're in their careers. There's both careers. And so they're managing that. They're managing planning the wedding. We just don't need to make some of the things that should be kind of easy, all that difficult. So
yeah.
Don't complicate it.
Yeah.
And that'll be our tip. Don't complicate it. So
yeah.
Hire Chris.
Keep it simple, stupid, right? That's the old thing.
No, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, I would love to, any of your couples that are looking, I would love to just have them check out the site. It's just personalwedding.net. And, there's other resources on there. So like if they want to write their own vows, there's some things on there for that. There's different readings on there. I'll say this too. If you've got couples that if they really, want their uncle or cousin or whoever to do it, I've offered this in the past too. If they want to if they can call me, they can, if you want to use somebody else that's close to you and your family, I don't mind talking with somebody and just walking them through the process.
That's very generous of you.
That's very sweet.
Well, you may know Robbie Rich, right?
Yes.
Robbie?
We love Robbie.
Yeah, Robbie's my guy. He's my buddy. And so he's a DJ that does that a lot. But then he was doing one for a family. And I said, dude, just call me and let me walk you through. Here's how you do a rehearsal. Here's how you do. And he knocked it out of the park. So I don't mind doing that too. So that's just because I want everybody to have the wedding that they want to have. And
well, that speaks volumes, Chris, because that just means like you genuinely really care and you really love what you do if you have, just a generous heart like that.
Well, I appreciate that. But it's true. I really do I would hate for somebody to have that awkward moment. And I'm like, well, you didn't hire me. So, I'm not looking for that. Know, because it is special sometimes if you have somebody, a family member doing it, then, gosh, don't let them wade in this sea of confusion about what they're supposed to do. Just call me. It's okay. I don't mind taking some time. So
yes, I agree. All right. So before we wrap up, we always like to ask our guests what is their favorite part of a wedding, and you can't say ceremony. So we're going to ask you your favorite part outside of the ceremony of a wedding.
Oh, wow. I think sometimes the initial meeting is a lot of fun. So the FaceTime, when we first get together, just getting to know a couple, everybody's a little different, but just hearing their heart about what they want in their wedding and just kind of getting to know them and then being able to be creative and say, okay, well, we're going to craft it to be this way, to match your vibe, to match your family, to match how you guys got together. And so to see the variety that there is between all the different couples, but then, sometimes that initial meeting, because I'm just a people person, so it's fun to meet new people,
I agree.
And like I said, it's always a happy moment,
No, it is.
So we're not planning a funeral or something.
No.
We're planning away, and so to be able to plan something that's so big and so fun together and do that by meeting new people is a lot of fun for me. So
love it. All right.
All right. That's outside the ceremony. How's that?
So no.
Very good.
Okay.
That works.
Right.
That works. I just had to keep you because I knew you were going to say ceremony. So anyway.
Oh, you're right. Well, I already kind of gave it away. That moment when the doors open and you see the bride and dad coming up. That's big.
For sure. All right. So Chris, one more time, tell us how to get in or the listeners to get in contact with you.
Yeah. Website is personalwedding.net. My phone and just my cell is on there. My email's on there. The email's just chris@personalwedding.net. Pretty easy stuff. And
simple.
So I've got an Instagram. I try to upload
You do
pictures.
pretty good.
Oh, that was one thing I wanted to say too, Chris. I just love your little tradition of always getting a picture with the couple. Like you always made a point. Like I'll wait in line. I'll get a photo.
Yeah, because it's special for me too. Because there's times that there's so many people that a couple years later. That's happened a lot. A couple of years later, a couple will come up because they're friends and they told their friends about it. And so I'm doing a wedding now for a friend and this couple is there with their baby now.
Yeah. Isn't that awesome?
It's just so fun. And they're like, oh, you did our wedding in 2019. I'm like, oh my gosh, And so then I like to go back in my photo roll and and
look.
camera roll and look. Like, oh yeah, you know. So yeah, that's fun. So I do try to keep. I'm not as I'm an old dog, so I'm trying to keep my Instagram a little bit updated, but not as much. But you can see on there, if somebody goes on, I think it's just personal_wedding _ Chris, something like that. I don't know. I think I probably need to put it on the website. I don't know.
Well, and August will have all this in the show notes and on the website that goes out. We'll have all that on there for you as well. Yeah. So couples can find you really quickly. So,
yeah.
All right, Chris, more than a pleasure.
Yeah.
We only mentioned, I think we mentioned sports 2 or 3 times, August. Yeah. Were you keeping track?
Well, then you said like major and minor, and that to me felt like a sports.
I don't know if that counts, Dog. I don't know. No. I don't know if you can put that one on the scoreboard, August.
No, yeah, there you go. There you go. So, all right.
What a joy, you guys. Thank you so much. It's a joy just to talk with you guys.
It was great having
and your audience too. And you know, we'll see each other soon, I'm sure, at a real live wedding. So
for sure. All right, folks. Thank you for listening to another episode of Now That I'm Engaged, How Do I Get Married? We'll see you next time.
All right. Bye, everybody.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Now That I'm Engaged, How Do I Get Married podcast, brought to you by Fantasy Sound Event Services. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode. Please get in touch with me if you have a topic you would like us to cover, or if you are struggling with your wedding planning. Please be sure to submit a question at podcast@fantasysound.com. I encourage you to check out our other episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're a fan, we'd love if you would subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. It helps others find our podcast so they can learn from our guests too. And to everyone listening, happy wedding planning.